Well, and just the thing that struck me as I read about the battle is just so much that could have gone right went right for the Americans. And if not for all of those things just coming together in the same, I mean, it only lasted, a couple hours, right?
Yeah, it was weird. We shouldn't have won. And the British shouldn't have retreated. Yeah. I mean,
any one of those things that had changed, it would have been a different outcome.
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Teich.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from the J.C. Steiniger and M.E. McDonald Charitable Fund at Adirondack Foundation, in support of the Adirondack Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities.
When I think of the location of historic battles on North American soil, I think about Revolutionary War places such as Lexington and Concord and maybe Bunker Hill, Civil War places like Antietam and Gettysburg. But how about the War of 1812? Fort McHenry in Baltimore, the Battle of New Orleans? Maybe your history book was different, but I don't remember reading about Lacaille, Quebec, or Chazy, New York, or Plattsburgh. But you could make a strong argument that if you're going to learn about the Treaty of Ghent, that was the thing that ended the war, you really ought to learn about the Battle of Plattsburgh. For quite a few years now, a group of dedicated volunteers in Plattsburgh has been working to elevate that pivotal battle in our collective consciousness. They run a yearly commemoration of the battle in, not surprisingly, Plattsburgh that coincides with the anniversary in early September. Tom Donahue is the president of the organization called 1814 Commemoration Incorporated, and Chris Ransom is the secretary of the organization and is also in charge of the children's activities at the event. Nice to meet you both.
Oh,
it's a pleasure to hear. Yeah.
So it's probably safe to say that many of us remember only a few things about the War of 1812. Probably you remember more than most from your history lessons and what you do, but maybe we remember the causes of the war, maybe a few of the battles. Before we talk specifically about the Battle of Plattsburgh, it's probably worth noting that a lot of the war was fought up here in the North Country, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, and so why was this region so contested? Why was it such a vital part of the strategy of both sides of the conflict?
Well, you got Canada.
Yeah, the British had easy access to this area from Canadian Montreal back in the day, and that was their staging point for the East Coast to work their way back down to New York City. And they had control of the oceans because they were the mightiest shipping British Empire, just coming back from meeting Napoleon.
Yeah.
And the king said, well, while you're out there, go over and get those states back for us for our territory. So that's kind of a way of looking at why they're here and what was about to happen. They had been actually taking some of our sailors off their ships, putting them to work for them, and we just got sick of the whole thing. And remembering the fact that why we started in the first place, to get rid of the king and get rid of the taxes, and here they are coming back again to do the same thing. So now we're at the point where it's a full-fledged war. All these British sailors and soldiers have been sent over here to take back what they thought was theirs to begin with.
They're really trying to make good for the regret they had for losing 30 years before.
Exactly. So here we're sitting here now, and it's 1814. The war's been going on for a couple of years, and now, not like modern warfare. It just doesn't happen in a few days. They got to put soldiers on the ships, ship them over here across the ocean. So you're talking weeks and months to get it all going. But now they're all staged. You got 10,000 or more British soldiers up on the Canadian border. You got small little towns between the border and Plattsburgh. At that time, Plattsburgh was a small little town. And, the British commander said, okay, go down there and we're going to work our way all the way back down to New York City and take this whole country back for us. You got to imagine yourself being back in Plattsburgh at that time. The smart people in Washington, D.C. had already told the commanders to take 4,000 troops over to Sackett's Harbor because we know that's where they're going to attack us, which left, a ragtag 1,500 military and volunteers and local people here to protect the Plattsburgh area. and they're sitting there facing the fact that they know there's 10,000 hardcore British troops on their way down from Canada. It must have scared the hell out of them, just knowing what was about to happen.
Was it just poor intelligence on the Americans' part?
Yes, the British pulled one of the oldest tricks in the book. They sent all this information about they were going to be attacking on the west side over off Lake Ontario, and they bought it. So all the information that was sent out caused the people in Washington to send our troops out there. And it must be known that the commanders up here were adamantly against that because they knew what was happening. But again, in that time, if you wanted to get a message, you got to give it to a guy on a horse and have him go all the way from Plattsburgh to Washington, D.C. to deliver it. So it wasn't an easy thing to do. But what happened that makes Plattsburgh so important is that the battle on the lake with Commodore McDonough, which he actually won, which surprised everyone.
A lot of creativity, right?
It was,
Yes.
yeah, it was a turning point in this whole war. Very easily, the British troops, they had Plattsburgh surrounded. They could have easily just taken over Plattsburgh and kept on going. But when they found out that their navy that was so powerful had been beaten, they said, well, what's the use? We don't control the water anymore. We're getting the heck out of here. So it was a turning point in that whole war and actually led to the signing of the Treaty of Ghent, which ended the war. The Battle of New Orleans. Everyone knows about that. It
Right.
didn't really happen. They were already signing, the things were signed and on their way back on the ship, but they didn't know that. So they had the big battle down there. So it's the funny part I find is that people don't, like you were just saying, nobody knows about this history. It's not taught anymore in school. We have an education program we do on the side that we take the fourth grade students for a day of learning about what happened here in Plattsburgh. So it's very important for us to keep the history knowledge available to the public, and that's what leads us to doing a commemoration every year to make sure it stays. The history is not forgotten.
Do you have any theories why the Battle of New Orleans, given that it was irrelevant to the result of the war, gets so much more press than the Battle of Plattsburgh? Is it just New Orleans is a much bigger place? Is it because it's so strange to hear about a battle that takes place after the treaty has been signed? Because I think if you ask, your average person who took history in high school or even college, they could name the Battle of New Orleans, but most probably couldn't name the Battle of Plattsburgh.
I don't know why.
That's a really good question, actually.
Possibly because Andrew Jackson was there. He became a president. That might have something to do with it.
He's famous.
And recently, within the last 40 years, there's that Battle of New Orleans song that was written, so people remember the jingle,
Yeah.
remember the battle,
Yeah.
and maybe that's part of it. But interesting that when people find out what happened here, they're amazed that this little tiny town stopped the whole British Army and Navy. And otherwise, we'd be speaking British, or with an accent at least, maybe.
Have you thought of employing a songwriter to write a Battle of Plattsburgh song?
See, my husband's got a whole bunch.
Oh.
And there's other people that do them too.
So let's talk about the commemoration itself. What finally, obviously years after the battle, there's a memorial in what was it, from 1914 that stands in Plattsburgh. But what was the impetus for a broader commemoration so much later?
I think the bicentennial was coming, and a number of people in town really wanted to do something, and they wanted to gear up to have a really good bicentennial. I think that was a piece of it. And then there's just a lot of people that are interested in history.
I think it was just for the whole thing was to answer your question about why don't people know about the Battle of Plattsburgh? Well, let's have a little celebration and start teaching them about it. And that's, I think, how it all started. And it has survived now for 26 years in a row. This will be the 26th year that we do this, and we're proud of what we do. It's not easy. We're a nonprofit organization, all volunteers, and I think because of age, it's getting smaller and smaller each year, which is hard. And I think this year we've really put out the need for more volunteers and younger people to come and get involved and keep it going. And we have had some luck in getting new people. It's not easy. Let me put it that way. And a lot of people think, well, we do everything. It's a 4-day weekend and it's free to the public. They don't have to pay for anything. They get bands, they get the concerts, they get parades, they get all kinds of things. And if they want to give us a donation, we appreciate it, which means that for the 10 months out of the 12-month period, we're trying to raise money and make sure we can do it the following year. So that's kind of where we came from and where we are.
Why that's where the organization came from, but why the two of you? Why does this resonate so strongly with each of you that you've both been involved in it for so long?
Like me, I told you it was easy. They people said, "What's this for kids?" And it's like there was nothing. And then I actually hate wars. I mean, I think most people really do, but I really hate wars. So it was like, okay, can we do something positive? I mean, games and things how you play. This is a real positive, and people play and have games no matter what, even with wars.
Well, and Tom, before we get to you, talk about those games. I mean, what is it that you're providing for kids, and how does it reflect on the history that took place there?
Well, we try to do games that people would have played at that time. When people are inventive, they will play with whatever they've got. So we have hoops, we have games of graces, we have tug of war, we have tops. Like, we have over 40 games. And we'd like to bring in some more games that other people played, but we haven't quite figured that out yet. And it's a lot of fun, and people enjoy it. And they're not electronic. And the kids and everybody absolutely loves playing them because it's very interactive. And the thing that really me in the beginning was that we offered the games for the kids because that was the purpose. But the first year, the grandparents and the parents were right in there with it. It was just amazing. It was like that's why I stayed.
It is amazing to watch the kids, though. Normally you'll see kids on the street with their cell phones out and not talking to each other and texting each other, and yet when they get involved in these hands-on games, you don't see cell phones. You see them talking to each other and having a good time, and it brings them back to what life used to be. Part of our goal for the commemoration is to immerse people in what we call living history. This is what it was like back then, and appreciate what you have now because this is what was happening when they were about to be attacked by a major army.
Well, and so what was it that originally attracted you to this corner of history?
Uh, I've always loved history. Actually, I grew up very close to here and never knew anything about Battle of Plattsburgh. It's like nobody tells you about it. It's not taught in school. And we would drive by this great big giant monument and say, "That's pretty cool," but no one really knew what it was there for. No one told you. And I thought to myself, when I retired in 2014, I need to do something. So let me go down to Plattsburgh and see what this Battle of Plattsburgh is all about. And which is how I got involved. I started. They said, "Well, you can help us out by setting up the vendors in the park. See, make sure they get a spot." And for many years, there was a Battle of Plattsburgh Association that started the Battle of Plattsburgh commemoration. And then in 2015, they said, "Well, we're now aging out, so we really don't have the energy and the will to continue to do this." So at that time, the city of Plattsburgh says, "Well, we'll take it over." And so for 5 years, the city ran it. And then we were volunteers for the city, helping because they really kind of ran it, but they still asked us to do all the work. You know how that works? So surprisingly enough, in 2019, we were planning the next year's battle, and we got a message that the city wanted to see the two people running the organization at the time. They came back to a meeting and said, "We got some bad news. The city just told us that after this year, they're not going to do it anymore. They're just going to stop." So a bunch of us in the room that just loved history and didn't want it to end said, "Well, why don't we form a group and take it over and try to do it ourselves?" And that's what we've been doing since 2019. And of course, the very first year, we were all ready to do this, and COVID hit. So, the next couple of years, they couldn't come across the border with the reenactors. And then we had a problem a couple of years ago. New York State signed a new law where you can't carry weapons in a group And so we couldn't have oh my gosh, and every year seemed to be what a nightmare, but we still did it. And now we're getting to the fact where we're getting some large crowds that come down, and it's not only historical, but it's fun. We got the biggest parade in the North Country. Reenactors this year are a little sparse because we happen to be doing it the same weekend as Fort Ticonderoga's big events. We try to add a little bit something new each year. We got concerts. The U.S. Army band is playing a free concert. They'll be here all weekend. We got another concert at the Strand Theater with tribute to Tom Petty, which will be great. We got an outdoors concert on Friday night on the steps of City Hall. So a lot of entertainment, a lot of fun.
So reenacting is part of the commemoration. I guess I'm curious how you handle the water based part of, because I mean obviously the naval battle was a huge part of what made the Battle of Plattsburgh significant, but you don't have warships, right?
No, but a few years back, I think it was the last time, 15.
Probably a few years.
They had locals that actually rebuilt scale models, actual models of the bateaus and the rowing boats that were used, and they would take them out on the bay and have a reenactment on the water.
Wow.
It hasn't happened now in the last 5 years. A lot of reason was because of the change in the climate. The water level's been too low to launch the boats.
Yeah.
One year we had one of the tall sailing ships come up from Toronto, came across the St. Lawrence, was here for the battle. It was really neat, but it's been a struggle the last few years to do anything on the water.
What makes each of you, I don't know, happiest or most satisfied when you see people either at the commemoration or leaving it at the end of the day or the end of the weekend, for example? How do you know that like what you've done has been worth it?
Well, it's easy for me because I work with the kids. I mean, it's just easy. When you see people and they're engaged and they're trying things and they're happy. I mean, one of the nice things about our group, it's the nicest group of people to work with. It's really that simple. That's the other addicting thing. The people that are doing this are like got their hearts in it. And so that's nice. And just you can see the people that are enjoying things. I mean, it's I mean,
Yeah, I think the way if we weren't doing something right, we wouldn't have crowds of thousands of people coming to this event. I'll give you an example. I got a phone call maybe 6 months ago from a lady that went to our website, found our number. She was looking for Benjamin Morse, who was a Captain Benjamin Morse, commander. It was her 5 times great grandfather. And they knew that there was a sword presented by the government at the time to a certain, and they were looking for it because they knew it was somewhere. Turns out it's in the Clinton County Historical Association in a display here in Plattsburgh. They're going to fly in from California just to see the sword because it meant so much to them. They're following the heritage of their family, and they're bringing the whole family. We get a lot of actual descendants of Thomas McDonough that come year after year after year. And of course, we play it up as, this is important. These are the actual descendants, and we introduce them and we have dinner with them. And we do all kinds of good things. So,
And for people that don't know, Thomas McDonough was the American commander.
right, commander of the ship. And that story, that's another great story. It's what happened. You got these major ships from the British fleet coming down from Canada. We had a small little fleet that was built in 40 days across the lake in Lake Champlain, sitting in Lake Champlain. The big difference was McDonough was smart enough. He knew the currents, he knew the winds. He positioned his ships so that the wind was blowing south into the ships. And when the British came around, they were having the battle. And luckily, one of the first rounds from the American ships blew the anchor off the major British ship. And so the way they worked at that time, they shoot off all their guns in each direction, turn their ships around, shoot the other side. Well, McDonough swung his ship around and kept firing at the British, but because they didn't have an anchor to hold them to turn, they couldn't get the other side of the ships going, so they surrendered. Oddly enough, as soon as the army from the British Army heard of the surrender on the water, they turned around and went back to Canada. So it was just a matter of odd little things that happened, and that's the story that is so important. And another little story is the Plucky Rooster. It's a big event that is Plucky Rooster contest. And we had a meeting last night. We had a new person there. He says, "What is this Plucky? What's the deal with Plucky Rooster?" Anyhow, but the story is the first volley hit the cage the rooster was in because on board the ships at that time they had food, obviously roosters and chickens for eggs. And when the volley hit, the rooster flew up into the mast and started crowing. And at that time, that was a sign, that was an omen of good luck. Interestingly enough, every ship named the Saratoga from that point to present day aircraft carrier Saratoga, one of the emblems is a rooster. So it's a neat story.
Mm-hmm.
We have a guy in a Kentucky rooster contest. We have a crowing contest. It's a lot of fun.
Well, and just the thing that struck me as I read about the battle is just so much went right that so much that could have gone right went right for the Americans. And if not for all of those things just coming together in the same, I mean, it only lasted, a couple hours, right?
Yeah, it was weird. We shouldn't have won. And the British shouldn't have retreated.
Yeah.
I mean,
any one of those things that had changed, it would have been a different outcome. We're proud to be here in Plattsburgh to tell people what happened here and to give them a good time for a weekend. It just makes you feel good when it's all done. Like you were saying, what makes you feel good? You'll see the expression on people's faces. They'll come up to you and say, "Sprayed I've ever seen," or that thing you do with the kids over there. My kids loved it, and they were just happy to get them off their phones or off their computers, or just for a day out with their grandparents.
yeah.
Well, it sounds like a really remarkable few days, and just a reminder that the North Country, for not necessarily getting a lot of attention from other parts of the country, really, was significant to something that made the United States we know today possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's important too that part of our event is to do memorial ceremonies at the different grave sites up here, and I think that has added to this event knowledge-wise for people. We invite them to come to the cemetery and witness a grave of a captain from a British ship right next to the captain from an American ship, which doesn't happen. And we get attachés from the British Navy that come up here and be part of it, and Canadians. It's a learning experience, but also it's a touching experience. There's graves around here that they don't know who's in them, but they were part of that war. They were buried together, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tom, Chris, thank you both so much. Best of luck with this year's commemoration, and I hope we'll talk again down the road.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us.
Tom Donahue and Chris Ransom with 1814 Commemoration, Inc. That is the organization that plans and runs an annual commemoration of the Battle of Plattsburgh, a pivotal battle that effectively ended the British attempt to recapture the North in the War of 1812. This year's commemoration runs September 11th through the 15th at various places in and around Plattsburgh, and you can find a link to more about it from ncpr.org/northwards. That's all for this edition of Northwards. Ethan Shanty is with us now to do a historical reenactment of our closing credits.
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The show is written, edited, and produced by Mitch Tyke with digital production supervision by me, Ethan Shanty. Caitlin Kelly handles our social media, Bill Hanel is our digital director, and Doyle Dean is our production manager. Music is by the Wickmore Jazz Trio of Plattsburgh. To support this show and find more podcasts, visit ncpr.org. This is NCPR, North Country Public Radio.